Well, good morning, everyone, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to this very exciting launch of not one but two international rail competitions. Over the next 3 hours, you'll hear from global rail experts giving you everything that you might need to, fingers crossed, be successful. I think it's fair to say it's been an unusual last 18 months, not least for rail. So this is the ideal opportunity for us to look out internationally and build on relationships in Vietnam, Canada, India, and Australia, strengthening UK businesses and promoting the very best that the UK has to offer. We'll move on to the agenda so that you can have a quick look at what we will be doing over the next 3 hours. I won't read it out all to you, but you can see that we're going to be exploring both competitions, and we do have some fantastic speakers, as I promised. Next slide, please. As well as hearing, of course, from Innovate UK on how the actual application process works, so that we hopefully cover off everything that you might need. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. If you are having any difficulties with technology, please ask for help in the chat. Similarly, we do have Q&A slots throughout the morning, so pop any questions for our speakers into the chat. If you're on YouTube, they will be pulled through for you as well, so please don't worry, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. We may not have time to answer them all, depending on how many we get, but you will be able to get in touch with many of our speakers following today's event, including myself, and I would encourage you to do so if you do have any outstanding questions. We do also have Meeting Mojo available, which is our networking platform for you to make connections with attendees and others, which is really useful if you are going to start thinking about your application team. So now, very pleased to get us started by handing you over to Minister for Exports, Graham Stuart. Minister, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to have the chance to speak to you today about the enormous opportunities ahead for British rail industry exports. In Britain, of course, railways have always been so important to us. In a BBC poll to find the greatest ever Britain, the British public voted the engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel second, ahead of Shakespeare, Admiral Nelson and Isaac Newton. So perhaps it's no surprise that railways have played a critical role in our economic success for generations. They're a big component of our island story, a technological innovation that we spread worldwide. British pioneers and engineers helping construct the steel arteries which fueled economic growth across the world and continue to fuel it today. Now, demand for British technological expertise in this sector is set to grow even further as UK-based innovators help shape the rail industry of tomorrow, designing and building cleaner, greener, more autonomous trains fit for the future. Now, increasing demand for rail travel means that the UK supply chain has had to adapt and develop to become truly world-leading across all areas, from construction to rolling stock to operating companies. As a result, our rail network is one of the safest, most reliable and technologically advanced on Earth. And as we recover from the impacts of the global pandemic, innovation again will be key to trade-led growth in the months and years ahead. And that's why I am so delighted that DIT, my department, and Crossrail International are joining forces with Innovate UK to support these competitions, helping British small and medium-sized businesses test and adapt their products for overseas markets, putting them in pole position to embrace the new export opportunities that are emerging globally, supporting them to start their exporting journey in some of the world's most dynamic and diverse markets, including Australia, Canada, India, and Vietnam, helping British business harness its full trading potential through the benefits exporting can bring in terms of productivity, profitability, and resilience, driving technological change, creating jobs, and delivering growth, so importantly, across the whole of the UK, embracing the opportunities that only global trade and investment can deliver. So I encourage you all to consider applying for the feasibility grants so you can take the next step for your business. This industry is central to Britain's future, a future of sustainable, long-term, clean growth. And I'm sure that this event will play a major role in advancing that agenda, so we can stay on track for growth, steam ahead into a bright future for UK rail, and with no more appalling puns, I say thank you very much. I hope you're as enthusiastic about this project as I am.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I entirely agree that one key strength of the UK supply chain, especially in rail, is its adaptability, which I think is very strongly reflected in these two competitions. So next up, I'd like to introduce another exciting speaker, Miss Emily Hamblin, Her Majesty's Consul General in Ho Chi Minh City and Country Director for the Department for International Trade in Vietnam, to explore some areas of opportunities for UK companies in the Hanoi Metro project and the wider importance of rail infrastructure in Vietnam. So, Consul General, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to those of you joining from the UK, and good afternoon to anyone else in Vietnam or elsewhere in the world. And thank you to the Minister for those words. It's a real pleasure for me to be able to attend today and witness the launching of this competition, an SBRI competition focused on digital transformation for the Hanoi Metro Line 5 in Vietnam. And as we know, a partnership between Innovate UK, Crossrail International and the Department for International Trade. And as the country director for the Department for International Trade here in Vietnam, I'm really delighted to know that the successful outcomes from this competition will potentially be applied for Metro Line 5 here in Hanoi in Vietnam. And today I just wanted to underline a few key points for you about the Vietnamese government's commitment to infrastructure development, and in particular to rail and urban rail infrastructure development, which is creating significant opportunities in this sector, and also about the excellent reputation of the UK's expertise and of UK generated technology in the rail sector in Vietnam, which I think puts British companies in a good position to benefit from these opportunities. So firstly, to say that the government of Vietnam very much recognises the need to develop this country's infrastructure. I think infrastructure need in Vietnam is estimated at around $480 billion looking out to 2030, which is obviously a very significant figure. And I think the government's own commitment here to addressing this need is evident in the fact that the country's percentage of GDP spent on infrastructure is among the highest here in Vietnam of anywhere in Southeast Asia. And within the country's infrastructure development plan, rail and urban rail development are clearly areas of major focus. And in terms of urban rail development, there are ambitious plans in place, including to build 8 new metro lines in Ho Chi Minh City in the south of Vietnam, as well as 8 new metro lines up in Hanoi. And these metro development plans are really crucial to help this country, to help Vietnam to switch towards more use of the public transport systems here, and to help big cities like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City to tackle really pressing issues such as traffic congestion, but also pollution and carbon emissions more broadly. So for the moment, the first 2 lines in each city are under construction or at the procurement stage, but obviously these are parts of longer term, quite ambitious, broader plans. And secondly, it's really clear to me that Vietnamese stakeholders here really do value the UK's expertise and technology coming from the UK in the rail sector. And UK companies here have had success in the supply chain. Companies like Mott MacDonald, like Arup, like Pandrol, for example, have already engaged in a number of urban rail projects in Vietnam. And although the involvement of British companies is still relatively limited, and given the scale of the opportunity, I really do hope that more and more UK companies will be able to take forward the opportunities and to participate in these urban rail projects in Vietnam in the future. To highlight a particular area, of course, digital transformation is currently a real priority on the Vietnamese government's agenda. The country has got a national digital transformation programme that runs until 2025, as well as a longer term vision out to 2030, in which digital transformation in the field of rail transportation is among the focus themes. And finally, just to say that I understand that Crossrail International has long been in discussions with the Hanoi Metropolitan Railway Board, MRB Hanoi, which is the government organisation in charge of the development of the metro system in Hanoi, in discussion with them about building a digital strategy for Hanoi's Metro Line 5, which will potentially be applicable to the whole metro network at a later stage. And I therefore really believe that the themes chosen for the competition being launched today are based on the actual need from MRB. And I believe that the application of UK technologies in the digital transformation for Hanoi Metro Line 5 will help to enhance the efficiency, both in terms of the initial project delivery, but also in terms of operation and maintenance going forward into the future. And therefore, it would definitely be a very good example of expertise sharing between the UK and Vietnam in the infrastructure sector. And although the aims of this competition are for the outcomes to very much serve and to benefit the Metro Line 5 in Hanoi, as I've mentioned, there are further potential opportunities for application in wider metro networks in both Hanoi and in Ho Chi Minh City. So I will just end there by saying that I wish the competition great success, and I'm really excited about its potential to bring valuable, innovative solutions. So my really sincere thanks to MRB Hanoi, to Crossrail International, and to Innovate UK for your inputs and your engagement in order to make this competition happen. And I wish you all great success with it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're as excited as you are, which is always nice to share. And I think it's probably very heartening for our viewers to hear that commitment from the government in Vietnam to that spending on rail, the infrastructure development side. So it's clear that there are a lot of opportunities, which is exactly what we like when we're linking into a competition like this. So thank you so much for your time. Now I want to move on to integrating innovation projects into the digital transformation of Hanoi Metro. And first, I'm going to hand you over to Paul Dyson, CEO at Crossrail International. So Paul, take it away.
Thank you very much, Daisy, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody viewing. And thank you, Emily, for the introduction. Actually, you must have seen all my slides because you gave a very good overview of everything that we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 months. So what I'd like to do is just give you a quick briefing on Crossrail International and our role in and our involvement in this process. And I'll give that overview and then I'll hand over to my colleague Malcolm Taylor, who will take you through the detail of the competition. Maybe just to recap on the scene itself. So Crossrail International, we're an arm's length body to the DFT, and we're here to help promote UK businesses internationally, but also share some good practice from the UK, drawing on particularly the expertise and lessons learned from the Crossrail project. As Emily mentioned, we've been in discussion now with Hanoi Metro for about the past 5 or 6 months, and it follows on from a long history of engagement with the client and also with the national government, particularly the Ministry of Construction, as part of the GIP, the Global Infrastructure Programme that was set up some 3 years ago. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So as I said, Crossrail International, an arm's length body to the DFT. We are actually sponsored by our Secretary of State, and we effectively trade internationally as a consultancy business, but to really open up opportunities also for the UK suppliers. And that's where this competition has come into play. If we go on to the next slide, please. And then the next one. So just a slide on the proposed system, well, the existing and the proposed system. As it was mentioned, we have one line actually in service, another under construction, and line 5 is actually at feasibility stage at the moment. So Hanoi Metro have been going through a transformation process. And if we switch on to the next slide, please. But it's all started, the UK's involvement all started from our involvement with the GIP programme, as I mentioned. So in 2018, we signed, or the government signed an MOU with the Ministry of Construction to collaborate and undertake knowledge exchange in the area of BIM. So for the last nearly 3 years, the UK has been training experts, including the team from the Hanoi Metro on BIM. And this is where we've come in, really, as an introduction through the DIT team in post, and shows the effectiveness actually of the work that they undertake in linking UK businesses to potential clients. We have picked up on that process and really sort of looked at what next in terms of the digital transformation programme. So our intention and our offer to MRB is to take them through a digital strategy. So for line 5, which is, as I mentioned, in feasibility stage, to take that project and then help them as a client develop their digital strategy for the delivery of their entire programme. And the aim is, through that digital strategy, to use it as a pathfinder for the future lines in Hanoi, and then potentially also in Ho Chi Minh if it's acceptable. But that's the strategy, and I think what we're looking for really is the next steps to solidify that strategy. How do you bring them to life? And this is where IUK and our discussions with Kelvin Davis and the team have really, I think, strengthened the whole offer that we've been able to start. And I suppose the basis of this process, the digital transformation process, and running this competition, is to basically bring to life the digital strategy. So Malcolm will go through the 4 areas of I suppose the competition that we would like to use then to bring to life the strategy. The main point here also is that this gives a great opportunity for UK businesses to engage directly with the client through this process, and then hopefully as a result maintain some relationship further downstream. I think the key thing that I'd like to impress here, if we go on to the next slide please, is that Crossrail International will be running through the whole process. So we're going to be starting our digital strategy probably 2 or 3 months earlier than the intended start of this programme of works, which is due for January. And when this competition, when the work actually starts, we'll have already spent some time developing the digital strategy. But the intention is that the work that's developed over the 3 months of this programme from January, February and March will feed into the digital strategy, and we'll be there to help liaise between UK businesses and the client to make sure that everything works effectively, basically to enable the delivery of this competition. So what I'd like to do is maybe hand over to Malcolm, and Malcolm can run through the individual competitions themselves, and then we'll take questions later. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. A real privilege to be here. There's no doubt we were really impressed back some 3 years ago when, in fact, MRB, Hanoi Metro management team, came over to Crossrail to actually visit us. In fact, they visited us in Crossrail several times to have a look at some of the technologies that were being used, and in the context of BIM, building information modeling world. And they are very keen to try and work with us, I think, to develop and take forward many of the sort of information management principles into their business. So they're starting from a point of a considerable sort of keenness and enthusiasm, but they do need some help to make this happen. And this is really where we're coming in to help them. The idea really for us to develop this digital strategy is to set them up so for, as Paul had mentioned, as a pathfinder project, but so something that will help them transform the way in which they can deliver this particular project, but also looking longer term into the world through project delivery into the sort of asset management life cycle stage of line 5 and also their other future lines. There's a particular sort of common purpose across these themes that we have, because we have 4 individual packages that can be gone for as individual packages, and that really can be treated individually, or they can be joined up and worked on in collectively, so people can apply for one or more of these packages. The detail of actually the sort of aspects of how do you actually create the proposals are going to be touched on later, how you complete the forms and the like. My role here is really just to touch on these particular themes and to talk about them. There are some common issues, some common aspects, such as technology as an enabler, and the common underlying principles across these themes, such as sort of standardized, classified and well-structured data. So if we move on to the next slide, the first of the 4 themes really is looking at a digital PMO, because particularly in the past, our BIM world has really focused on sort of technical delivery of the technical aspects of projects. This particular innovation theme is about broadening us out and using the same sort of information management principles to create digital transformation in the management of the project itself. So typically, project management processes have been traditionally undertaken by lots of separate teams working in discrete units and trying to bring data and information together. And what we're looking here is to explore digital solutions that can help automate, improve the speed and quality of decision making, and bring the world of the PMO together. It's not just looking for software solutions, it's looking to see how we can bring that world together in the terms of processes, the business rules, the workflows, the management plans, to bring all that together and how that could work. That's so that was the first theme. On the next slide, please, we're looking more towards a theme that's setting out and establishing the what you would see could call as the DNA of a railway project. How you can we want you to sort of explore and establish comprehensive data structure for the sort of rail infrastructure program. Rail infrastructure, as we know, there are lots of specific discrete assets such as stations and all the equipment, but also long lengths of linear assets. All sorts of issues come from the data and information that's needed for those. And again, traditionally, they've always been held in disparate teams that kind of come together, usually in a very analog way. So we're looking for innovation that will support the program and project and asset management requirements for not just the individual assets, but how you can bring all the data and information that underpin railway assets and bring them into a common data environment that everybody can work and use together. So again, not just software solutions there. The third theme, which is on the next slide, is actually a slide that is actually an innovation theme that is one that often is overlooked. Environmental work on most railway projects usually starts very early and comprises a lot of critically important information that we use and create and build up that actually gets created in, again, very random ways. The underlying data of much of the environmental work that we have on railway projects is often hidden behind all sorts of traditional forms of graphics and document collection techniques and the like. Invariably, over time, and particularly when you imagine environmental work gets started early, when we get late into delivery and things change, it can be very hard to go forward and use and manage the change of environmental data. So we're looking to create and show how we can use digital technologies to capture this information, use it, and improve our decision making through the project life cycles in the environmental world. Environmental data comes in all sorts of shapes and forms and sizes. So it's how could we bring together all of this type of information and use it in a practical, cohesive and in clever ways. So that's the third theme. And finally, the fourth theme on our next slide is really about focusing on the asset information management. We create these assets in our railway projects, and usually we have difficulty in handing them over into operation and maintenance. But actually the inventory breakdown structure that we can have, and it can be used as part of the management systems in our projects. And what we're looking here for innovation that can really show and demonstrate the linkage between the individual asset data, the way in which we can create smart assets and use the information from our assets in operation and maintenance. And in the digital world now, we talk a lot about digital twins, and clearly this is alluding to that concept. But we're not, in this innovation here, we're not just looking for the people to describe or to list out digital twins. It's really looking for innovative ideas about how they're actually created, how they're used in that railway information management systems, and how the technologies that people are creating today in this world of digital twins, how they could be harnessed by MRB in the operation and maintenance of their railway. Importantly, on the to us actually is the it's very important, I think, in this competition for you to read the technical annex that's been available to you. In that technical annex, it does actually give you a lot more detail about these innovation themes, but it also shows you some indicative final report structures, if you like, contents lists for what these reports could look like that would be the output of the 3 months work. It's important, I think, to say a number of things about those report structures that we list out there, the contents lists. They are entirely indicative because your innovations may change what those content lists might look like, but they give you a start for where we're coming from in our thinking. There are a couple of things I would like to say about those. A common thing in those report structures is, and what is really important, that much of this digital transformation is actually not just about technology. It is absolutely about people and getting teams and others to understand what we're trying to do here. So an important output there is the understanding and laying out the actions for implementing and the issues about bringing into use your innovations and ideas. So each of those 4 themes, each of those 4 studies is looking to, and it's important that the actions are listed out there. If software systems are recommended, then clearly an awareness of cost and issues of implementing and bringing them into case are also important. At Crossrail, International, we will be having meetings every week with virtually with MRB, and so there will be considerable interaction between ourselves and also a need to bring yourselves and some of the ideas into play. So you'll be working with us and directly to MRB. I think that's all I'd like to say just at this moment in time, but very happy to take questions, I think, and particularly I'm sure people will be interested in how your proposals will actually be put forward. But that's all from me just for the moment.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. So maybe just as a wrap up, I think the process we're offering MRB, which is basically to help them develop a digital strategy and then enable it through these really important competitions, is really about helping the client build their capacity and capability to achieve their digital transformation. And as a result of that, hopefully influence the long-term practices in Vietnam to gain better outcomes from their large programs. Emily said it earlier, there's a huge pipeline of opportunities in Vietnam. What we're seeing in Hanoi and then in Ho Chi Minh are probably some of the largest programs of metro works anywhere in the world. And so this offers a great opportunity for the UK to participate. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you both. It's really brilliant to hear about the wider context and the breadth of the opportunity, as you say, and that whole life cycle piece of Line 5 and beyond in the future. I love the idea of the DNA of a rail project, so those building blocks of data that stack up to that final success comprehensively. So that's for the sector and obviously, of course, for passengers. So it's really helpful to hear all of the detail behind that and the thinking behind that as well. So thank you so much for your time, and we will have a Q&A shortly. But first, a dive into the detail and scope of the competition, which is, of course, the SBRI for digital transformation for Hanoi Metro Line 5. So for clarity, our segment on the SBRI for global rail export innovation for Australia, Canada and India will begin later at about 11:25. So now focusing in and handing over to Kelvin Davis, rail lead at Innovate UK, who will be taking you through everything you need to know for competition 1. So Kelvin, over to you.
Thank you, Daisy. That's a tough act to tell you everything that you need to know about bidding into this competition. But many thanks to Paul and to Malcolm for what they've said about the competition. And this, as Daisy says, is a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of how you bid into the competition. So first of all, I'm going to take a brief moment to introduce Innovate UK. And later on in the day, as Daisy says, we'll have some presentations from the team about the second competition and about the actual online process through which you bid into these competitions. And Sonia will be joining later in the day as well. So the team that's put together this competition from within Innovate UK is listed here. So Sonia is speaking last in the day and is responsible for the online application process. Dan and myself have taken a lead in the organisation in putting the competitions together technically. And then we're going to be joined by Dora later on from Brussels, from our global team. And behind the scenes, of course, we've got Steve Sopp, who's our SBRI manager, and Daisy, who you've all met. So quick introduction to Innovate UK. I'm assuming that many of our audience are familiar with us. We are a government-funded organisation, part of UKRI, UK Research and Innovation. I used to say we were based in Swindon, but many of us have not been there for a very long time now. But we are one of the 9 organisations based out of Polaris House in Swindon. The difference between Innovate UK and our 8 sister organisations is that our sister organisations focus primarily on academia. Innovate UK, on the other hand, takes a strong focus on business and commercial development of those businesses. And loosely, our mission statement is to grow the UK's productivity. How do we do that? We invest public funding in helping teams to innovate and through that to grow. We do that both nationally and internationally, as in the case of this competition. If you'd like a strapline that we used to use, we are the government's innovation agency. And exactly as I've said, we have a very strong track record in innovation in the UK. We're good at it. We recognise the importance of it, and for that reason, significant amounts of public funding are invested through Innovate UK and through the other research councils in making the UK a fantastic player on the global stage for innovation. In terms of rail innovation, over many years, we've delivered a very successful series of programmes focusing on essentially national innovation. So the competitions you see listed here may be familiar to many of our audience. We have 2 themes. One is the Accelerating Innovation in Rail programme, and more recently, the First of a Kind Innovation programme. And they're an increasingly successful and an increasingly tried and trusted approach to helping innovators to understand the challenges in the railway industry nationally and to innovate against those challenges. And the competitions are cleverly designed to make that optimally successful. So in bidding into these competitions, teams have to partner with a railway organisation. That might seem like an aside or a small detail, but it's critical to making this successful, because through that partnering, the innovation community understands the challenges in the railway industry and can work with a partner in the railway industry to address them. And that has been applied nationally for a significant number of years now. And what we are hoping to do through this competition, and the one that you'll hear about later on today, is to apply that to a global forum. And what you're seeing is, Daisy's mentioned this is exciting. It is really exciting. We have 3 government departments working together for the first time to help the rail innovation community to succeed on an international market. So the Department for International Trade, we'll hear more from them later on, Crossrail International, Paul and Malcolm on the call, and of course Innovate UK. It's not been done before. We've heard the word Pathfinder mentioned a couple of times from Malcolm and Paul. That's exactly what we think of these competitions as. It is a Pathfinder, it is a pilot study, and the challenges to the British industry to make these successful. And if they are, we will be looking to perhaps repeat the exercise. So please help us to make these competitions as successful as you can. In terms of the scope and the eligibility, we have a budget of £300,000 available for the competition focusing on Vietnam. That includes VAT, and it is to deliver feasibility studies. What is the model here? We're assuming that the UK teams will have capability which is nearly ready to be deployed for the Hanoi Metro challenges. So the feasibility study will be designed to review the applicability of your innovation to that challenge, to recommend the modifications that might be needed for meeting that challenge, and then to deliver a feasibility study report which outlines the potential that you see for your capability. As we've heard, it's in support of Line 5 of the Hanoi Metro, and the 4 themes are listed here, as already outlined by Malcolm. What many applicants like about our competitions, this is SBRI, it is 100% funded, and projects of up to £75,000, including VAT. Critically, for the usual budgetary reasons, the work must be completed by the 31st of March next year. The objectives is exactly as we've said. It is to support organisations to deliver feasibility studies. It's a single-phase competition. We're not procuring a solution as part of this competition. We are procuring a report, in other words, your feasibility study, to outline how your innovation might be applied in the future. And for that reason, we are keen to highlight this isn't procurement. It's not any adoption or implementation of a solution would be through a future procurement exercise. The themes we've already touched on, and it's really important that you review these themes. You can apply to one of these themes per application. And as Malcolm outlined, it is the Digital Project Management Office, Efficient Data Management, Digital Environment Acceptance, and Digital Asset Information Management. If you look at the technical annexes, you will find a wealth of additional information in there that we won't go into on this call. It's all available online. Please have a look at the technical annexes and refine your application on the basis of what you find there. In terms of projects, we will be receiving applications in November this year with a view to starting projects on the 1st of January, and they must end by the 31st of March. Total eligible cost of £75,000, including VAT. Critically, at least 50% of the contract value must be for R&D services. So this is a rule of SBRI. So this is about innovating, taking existing capability, taking existing technology and innovating to adapt it for the requirements in Vietnam. And that's critically important, and that's for your organization to satisfy yourself that you meet that requirement for public funding. And in terms of the outcome, it will be a feasibility study report. In the technical annex, you will also find some guideline on what we believe those reports should contain, with different content suggestion for each of the 4 themes. So who can apply? Well, pretty much anyone. To lead a project, you can be an organisation of any size in the UK. Applicants are welcome from all sectors. As you've already heard, Crossrail are in a very favourable position to support you in introducing your team to the organisations in Vietnam that may ultimately own the challenges which you'll be addressing. And yes, a common question is, can I apply more than once? Yes, you can. This is a procurement exercise. You can apply multiple times, but you must submit a separate application for each theme that you wish to apply to. A few notes then. We only fund innovation in Innovate UK. If you already have a capability that you want to market, you don't need public funding, so you shouldn't be applying into this competition. So applications need to be materially different from previously funded work. Ourselves and Crossrail International will discuss the applications we receive, and we will make a judgment on whether the work being proposed is innovative. If you're VAT registered, I know this isn't the most interesting piece of admin, but if you are VAT registered, you need to include VAT on your invoices. If you're not VAT registered, that's fine, but you can't add VAT later should you become VAT registered. What you will be offered is a contract. So this is unlike some of the collaborative R&D activities that Innovate UK delivers. You'll be offered a contract for your deliverables, and that's firm and binding. And if there are any risks in delivering your contract, those are for you to manage. So you should be satisfied that what you propose to do is fully achievable within the timescales that you're proposing. And clearly, the projects we won't fund projects that don't address the themes identified. We won't fund projects which are not relatively high TRL. So we're looking for less blue sky research and development, more refinements of existing capabilities and existing technology. Clearly, we want some innovation, and we clearly want applications for teams that apply against the eligibility costs of the competition. It sounds like labouring the point, but each competition we receive about 10% of applications which breach the final one of those regulations and apply for an ineligible amount of funding. If you need the QR codes, they're there on the screen. You'll get these slides afterwards, but hopefully you've all found the online documentation about these competitions. And finally, we'll just remind you of the competition dates. Here we are on the 13th of September, working with Crossrail International and the Department for International Trade. We've been on a journey of about 6 months to get to today. So it's a bit of a celebration for us today to open the competition, to host this briefing event, and to finally launch things. We have just over a month, we've got 1 month, just over 4 weeks to receive your applications. So the 13th of October at 11 a.m. the competition will close. It's automatically closed, so please do note that the 11 a.m. is fixed and binding. On the 15th of November, we will have reviewed all your applications and we'll have prioritised the shortlist for funding. And we'll be planning to award contracts, a great Christmas for some of the teams, just before Christmas itself, on the 14th of December, with a view to starting projects on the 1st of January for a glorious 3 months activity running through until the 31st of March. So thank you very much. I hope that's useful, and we can take some Q&A, and I'll hand back to Daisy.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kelvin. Incredibly helpful as ever. And yes, we will be finishing this segment with some Q&A. Please do send in your questions now. If you have any queries about this competition, we're all here to answer those questions. So, get them coming in. I think what we will start with, though, is something I'd quite like to know. So Malcolm and Paul, thinking about the local context, on the ground, as you'd say, what would you say that any successful applicant, let's say someone's gone through the process, they've been successful, well done them, they've been awarded the funding. What would they need to keep in mind in the context specifically for this project, Line 5 on the ground locally, especially for someone who maybe hasn't worked internationally before? Do you have any top tips?
So Daisy, if I kick off then. So I think there are a number of issues, or a number of opportunities, shall I say. I think the key thing is that there really should be an aspiration to either develop or further develop your business in Vietnam. If you're not doing work there currently, then this would be a good entrance into that market and a good entrance into what is a very strong client with a strong pipeline. So that would be interesting. I think the other thing, of course, is we're there to try and help contextualize the innovation. So we will be available to, I suppose, act as the enabler and collaborator with MRB, which is key. So you're not doing this blind, and we will have set out quite a lot of context for those innovations by creating the digital strategy and the work that Malcolm and the team will be doing at the beginning, the end of this year, towards the end of this year. Malcolm, you're on mute.
We're actually, with working with a small task group that's actually set up within MRB to try and deliver it, because we do need champions within their organisation. We have some keen individuals in their company that are keen to develop a digital transformation across their business, but they know that it is really a question of not just technology solutions but hearts and minds. So we're actually working with that a small team there, and that's who we would be introducing the successful winners here to actually work with them as well to promulgate and push the ideas through into their business. So they have basic, they have basic understanding. They use things like AutoCAD, Primavera, or Microsoft Office. There is a certain, what I would say, good traditional level of understanding about information management, project information management, but it's quite basic. And so our challenges are organizational as well as technology as well. And so those are the things that people need to think about.
Maybe just add one small point to that actually, so our main contact is obviously our client, which is MRB, but they are closely attached to the Ministry of Construction, MOC, and their BIM task group will be part of this as well. When we're developing it with the ministry as well. So what we're doing, I suppose, is opening up a sort of further opportunities, further routes, further discussion points for anybody who's involved in this competition. So hopefully a very, an excellent opportunity really to get involved in what is a significant market and a significant future market. And also, Daisy, it'd be worth mentioning, so the support and the help that we have had from the DIT colleagues in post have been fantastic. And, there's a great network in these countries, and for new entrants into these markets, they provide a great support.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I think those are some really helpful pointers as well for everyone tuning in, even if they have got experience in this area. So thank you very much. We've got one for Kelvin here, which I think is a really important question to ask before people start committing pen to paper. Who can apply? So is this only for companies, or can organisations like universities apply?
Thanks, Daisy. So SBRI is a procurement exercise. It's pre-commercial procurement of innovation. As a procurement exercise, any organisation in the UK can certainly apply, including universities. The caveats would be that as part of applying, the competition guidelines need to be followed. So the innovation needs to be within a year of being ready for market. And what you will find in the application form is a request for a clear commercialisation plan. So yes, anybody can apply, but a clear route forward in terms of delivering a commercial product needs to be, really highlighted in the application.
Brilliant, thank you. It's very helpful. I've got another one for Kelvin. Lucky you. What will be the subcontracting guidelines if we have multiple subcontractors that may be outside the UK?
Well, subcontracting is a fairly complex issue. So this is UK public funding. So the desire is to commit the bulk of this funding within the UK to support British industry. If there is a requirement to subcontract outside the UK, that may be acceptable, but a good case might need to be made for that in your application. But each application would be taken on an individual basis and an assessment made. Based on the requirements and the availability of different technologies across the globe.
Yeah, makes sense. Malcolm and Paul, this is, I think, another one where I'm going to lead you slightly and try to get some interesting tips and information. But what would the ideal outcome look like? And I know that might sound a bit obvious. I promise I'm not asking you to spell it out ABC. But in the context, again, of someone who's maybe not applied for funding like this before, and from your perspective, what is that ideal outcome?
Good question, Daisy. So for us, it's really straightforward. I think we want to achieve some transfer of innovation from the UK develop something that is actually will ultimately become sort of best in class for Vietnam, and then ultimately achieve better outcomes from their investments in their rail sector and potentially across their infrastructure sector. So I think it's a mixture of applicability and practicality, but driven and underpinned by innovation, particularly for the Vietnamese market. So these are really big topics. I think the point is this is not just a feasibility study to be undertaken and then left on the shelf. We're really looking to drive this into the heart of what is, line 5 is at feasibility stage. It's a unique opportunity, I think, to influence the direction and travel of a significant project at such an early stage. And so for us, it's really about getting something that's very applicable to the client's requirements and something that we will help then land with them as well as part of the digital strategy.
Yeah, could I just chip in and say that for me, it will also be thinking of not having a study report that just has a nice long list of, if you like, tools, but it's actually how we make things happen, how we can, understanding how delivery and integration can actually happen. So it's actually understanding the issues of what needs to be done and how we need to do it.
Thank you. Kelvin, one for you on eligibility. Are organisations in Vietnam able to apply?
Thanks, Daisy. We were anticipating that sort of question might arise. So the answer is no. So this is UK public funding being invested primarily for the support of UK industry. So organisations in Vietnam are not able to apply for funding. That said, if organisations in Vietnam saw an opportunity to partner with a UK organisation, perhaps to reflect the Vietnamese capability, perhaps to add some additional Vietnamese capability, then there's no reason whatsoever that the teams couldn't partner, but that would be on a non-funded basis. So we'd see the UK organisation receiving public funding through this competition, and they could partner with a Vietnamese organisation if so desired, but on a non-funded basis. So that organisation might find funding somewhere else from its own capital, perhaps, or from a Vietnamese funding source. So that's entirely acceptable. But the Vietnamese organisation, to stress, could not receive funding from this competition.
Thank you for the clarity. And again, to remind you all, we do have Meeting Mojo available. So if you were looking to form a partnership of that sort, I recommend you go into the email, follow the instructions to set up your Meeting Mojo profile and look to see if there are any of those useful connections that you can make with companies who may be looking to bid into these competitions. We have another question, which is I suppose a scope question. Given the relationship between the 4 themes, is it preferred that one provider can deliver all 4 themes versus individually?
So I think I'll start with that. So I think ultimately we're saying what we're looking for is the best outcome for each of the individual competitions. So if that means that there are 4 separate providers, then fine. So I think we're entirely open to receiving your responses really, and then working out who is the best provider for each of the individual opportunities. Malcolm?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely get it. We recognise that there's a great commonality between some of these themes, but it's going to be, I think, in the applicants' list of benefits as to how they can, if they're successful, how they can demonstrate that being awarded more than one is going to have to come through on their application. They will be looked at as discrete individual packages, and there's clearly certain economies of scale and certainly sort of benefits that can be borne if applicants are tackling and are successful with more than one. But you're going to have to spell that out in the answers, because they're going to be answered on an individual basis.
Could I add to that very briefly, Daisy, if that's okay? So exactly as Malcolm says, when a team applies into this competition, that application will be assessed against one of the themes, and only one. And the initial question is this application in scope against the particular one of the 4 themes to which it's applied? If it touches on other themes, that's fine, but nonetheless, the application will be assessed against one of the themes. We should also stress one point, which is that the intention of the competition, the eagle-eyed amongst you may have spotted this, through funding 4 projects at £75,000, the intention is to fund one project, at least one project against each of the themes, and potentially one project only against each theme.
Thank you for the clarity there. We have a data question, which always come up. We would require some data, optical and or thermal, for the digital asset information management. Will the data be provided or collection of data done by participating companies? And follow up to that, if so, can we get a local data collection company based in Vietnam to reduce the cost? So where's the data coming from?
Malcolm, do you want to take that?
Yep, I'm just struggling for a brief moment to understand the sort of things that they may be interested. Yeah, I think in terms of if they're after information from information about MRB, I know certainly immediately now you could go and collect for your to actually make your submissions. There's enough information on the web to be able to understand about MRB. You can pull out of in the public domain, for example, there are examples of environmental impact assessments in Hanoi for earlier lines. You can begin to get a feel and a scale of what they're doing for making your presentation. What I would suggest is that if you do require some specific information or needs like that for your proposals, lock away somewhere some words that saying this is the type of data you would expect to receive or expect to have prior to starting the work in January, so that we can be prepared and we can get that if you need it. So I think that, to sum up, there is enough information there out online for you to, I would suggest, to be able to understand the scale and scope, and certainly some of the issues that we're dealing with. If you wanted to know about what the existing sort of software and type of things that MRB already have, as I say, I would they are very traditional in terms of their current levels of expertise and things like AutoCAD, Microsoft Office, Primavera. So they're at a I would call a modest, reasonable level. So I think there's enough there for you putting proposals together. And if you need more for starting the project, list it out in your submission.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We will finish then with our last question, which is, what is the view on enabling technology partners? So context here, we have a UK consultancy partner who do the study work, but then a US-based firm is asking that question. So enabling technology partners.
Malcolm, do you want to respond?
I think that's possibly more contractual, but I would think if the work is being done in the UK by UK people, and it's a UK PLC, my understanding is that would be fine. It's probably more for Kelvin, I guess.
Yes, so UK registered offshoots of multinationals, that's absolutely fine. So as long as there's a registered address in the UK, that is no issue whatsoever.
Wonderful.
I suppose what in terms of the actual question, in terms of the technology partner, so what I think we are not looking for at the moment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Malcolm, or phrasing it incorrectly, is technology solutions. What we're looking for is a design that supports the development of a client, which ultimately will lead to technology solutions, but further down the line.
Absolutely, yes. We're not looking for somebody to be able to turn around and say, here is a universal widget that will, if you use this will solve all your problems. It's about I think we said earlier, it's about business rules, it's about persuading people, transforming business practices and the way in which normal railway project delivery occurs, and it's using sort of innovative ideas in information management to make that digital transformation. So technology partners who can advise on that, I would suggest would be great, but we're not actually looking for the if you like, for the multifunctional spanner. It's how we're going to use it and what we're going to do with it that's the key that would need to be elaborated and spelt out in the final study report that would explain how we're going to help make and transform the delivery of the Line 5.
And Daisy will thank me for this segue, but Malcolm, exactly as you say, I think this is less focused on technology solutions, but the competitions we'll hear about this afternoon, focusing on the Australian, Indian and Canadian opportunities, there might be more opportunity there for technology solutions.
What a perfect segue into the break. Thank you, Kelvin. And thank you to all of our panelists. It's really helpful for people, obviously, to have this opportunity to ask their questions directly. So we really very much appreciate your time. And thank you once again for your wonderful presentations and all the detail there. And of course, thank you to Emily, who's popped off to her next very important meeting, but we'll record our thanks to her here as well. We will have a short comfort break, and as Calvin says, the details of our next competition. So if you could make sure you're back with us by 20 past, please, 20 past 11, we will see you all shortly.
Thank you, Daisy.
Fab. Well, welcome back, everyone. And we will be diving straight in to the detail and scope of our next brilliant competition. This is the SBRI for Global Rail Export Innovation for Australia, Canada and India. So I will be handing you over to Dora Meredith, Europe and Global Portfolio Manager, and Dan Piner, Rail Lead at Innovate UK. So Dan, Dora, over to you.
Thank you so much, Daisy, and it's really great to be here today to have the opportunity to present to you all. At Innovate UK, we are delighted to be working with the Department for International Trade on this fantastic competition. And my name is Dora Meredith. I'm in the global team of Innovate UK, and we'll be giving an overview of a bit of the background and the objectives of the competition. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So first of all, let me just give you a bit of an overview on the Innovate UK global portfolio. So our objective as a team is to help UK companies to access the knowledge and develop the partnerships globally to grow and scale successfully. If we go on to the next slide, please. There's lots of different reasons why companies work globally, and you can see some of them on the screen. Everything from working with customers, partners, gaining skills, to benchmarking competitors or accelerating time to market. We understand that there might be a very different reason for each different company in working internationally. And we try to make sure that our global programs try to meet these different drivers. And if we go on to the next slide, please. We've got a diverse toolkit of different programs designed to support companies with each aspect of global collaboration. I'm just going to give you a bit of a taste of what they are before we dive into the focus of today's competition. So, for example, we run programs like our Global Expert Missions, which is when we send groups of experts to visit global markets to help generate public reports and events to help you gain detailed insights of opportunities. So you can have a look on the KTN's website and see some of our public reports about different markets that we've already explored. The Global Business Innovation Programs, and that's when we send groups of companies abroad to visit global markets and explore and exploit potential opportunities. Our newest program, the Global Incubator Program, which is when we support companies to spend a short amount of time in world-leading incubators across the globe. Bilateral and multilateral programs. So this is some of our core international programming. So things like bilateral competitions with different countries, or through programs such as the Eureka Network. And again, all of those are advertised on our website. And finally, global feasibility studies, and that's the focus of today's briefing. When we look at supporting organisations to undertake feasibility studies for overseas markets. If we go on to the next slide, please. So we're now going to dive into the scope and eligibility of the call. So if we go on to the next slide, please. This is the SBRI Global Rail Export Innovation for Australia, Canada and India. So the opportunity that we're offering is for organisations to apply for a share of up to £450,000 to deliver feasibility studies that address rail sector challenges in Australia, Canada or India. And it will help accelerate the commercialisation of innovative ideas for fast-growing global markets. Now we're going to go into a little bit more detail into the specific competition for each of those countries, but a few key points. It's open to organisations of any size. Applicants must obtain a letter of support from a partner in Australia, Canada or India, and that's really where our collaboration with DIT colleagues comes in, because if you haven't got an existing partner in one of those countries, you can work with colleagues in DIT to help identify one, and we can talk more about that later in the presentation if that's of interest. The projects are 100% funded and they're up to £50,000, and all work must be done by the 31st of March 2022. If we go on to the next slide, please. So the objectives for the competition are to support organisations to undertake feasibility studies to demonstrate innovative railway technology solutions for overseas markets. They should help build new international business networks, and as I've mentioned, the competition is delivered by Innovate UK with support from the Department for International Trade. This competition, I think it's important to say, does not cover the purchase of any solution or the development of solutions. It's really about a feasibility study to understand the the applicability of your technology to that new market. But I'm going to pass over to my colleague Dan, who's going to dive into a bit more detail on what the specific themes are for each of the countries involved. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dora. That's really great. So as Dora says, my name is Dan Piner. I'm a rail innovation lead at Innovate UK, and very pleased to be here presenting to you today. So firstly, I'm just going to dive into a bit more of the detail of some of the specific themes. We have some listed developmental opportunities for Australia, Canada and India on the following slides, and we're looking for you to deliver for these developmental opportunities through a feasibility study. So if I just click through to the next slide, please. Firstly, Australia. There are three main themes for Australia. The first of these is operational optimization, including interoperability and standards harmonization between different operating and signalling systems. Second is monitoring and predictive maintenance of assets. So digital and physical tools to enable equipment maintenance and innovations to reduce manual operations. And thirdly, energy efficiency, including operational improvement. The next country, Canada, we have three more innovation opportunities listed here. Alternative propulsion technologies, including hydrogen fuel cell technology, wireless power transfer systems, battery train technologies. The second is energy efficiency, including electric power systems, energy storage systems, and operational improvement. And the third and final one for Canada is operational optimization. So railway scheduling, railway maintenance, real-time operations, and integrated mobility. For India, we have four themes over 2 slides. The first two are listed here. Firstly, security and crowding of stations in urban rail transit. So this includes station security systems for scanning of passengers and baggage, innovations which to help reduce queues and crowding at stations, technology-based crowd control and baggage management systems, and technology which helps to increase engagement with retail outlets at stations. The second theme is the monitoring and predictive maintenance of assets. So that includes automated technologies to reduce the requirements for manual inspections, technology to improve maintenance, reduce breakdowns and reduce disruption caused by maintenance issues, cost-effective technology to prevent failure of critical assets and to improve safety, and the innovative and cost-effective solutions to manage and maintain assets across the rail network, including track monitoring and maintenance, signalling, rolling stock and traction. And then the final two challenge or innovation opportunities for India are listed on this slide, which are improving freight operations. That includes the innovation in the planning and management of freight operations to improve utilization of existing resources, innovative systems and processes to help with improved planning and real-time information in capacity, supporting the end-to-end transportation to deliver efficient booking, tracking and delivery for freight, technology to increase the railway share of freight, particularly from road, and also to deliver a lowering of carbon emissions, and technology to deliver increased revenue from rail freight. Then finally, increasing train speed. So you can see the sub-bullet points here: technology to increase passenger and freight train speed whilst maintaining safety, innovation to reduce the capital expenditure required for infrastructure upgrades related to speed increases, technology to deliver increased speeds on existing infrastructure without major investments, innovation related to speed focusing on traction, signalling, rolling stock, bridges and civil structures, and cost-effective infrastructure enhancements. So we're looking for feasibility studies which will address for each application one of these challenges as set out on these slides. We're looking for projects that last up to 3 months, so they must start by the 1st of January 2022 and end by the 31st of March 2022, and have a maximum total eligible costs of £50,000 inclusive of VAT. The end output or the deliverable of what we're looking for through this competition is to produce a report on the outcomes of your feasibility study upon the completion of the project. This must include deliverables in an informative and illustrated report outlining your progress and written in the style of marketing material to help you commercialize in future. And we also request that the completion of the formal SBRI end of project report as well. Applicants into this competition must be a registered organisation of any size. You can be from any sector. You don't necessarily have to have worked in rail before within the UK. You can come from a different sector, and you may work alone or with other organisations as subcontractors. And we expect that all participants will work with an in-country unfunded partner in Australia, Canada or India to develop and demonstrate your products or services for the market. As Dora mentioned towards the start of this presentation, you do need to provide a letter of support, and the DIT can help you to find those partners. If you have a look at the scope documents online, you will see a link to your local trade office who can help connect you to your to potential unfunded partners in Australia, Canada or India. Applications for this competition need to be materially different from previously funded activities. We are looking for something new and innovative, hence the reason for this funding. The decision of Innovate UK and DIT is final. And as I just mentioned, we do request a letter of support from your partner in Australia, Canada or India. As a contractor providing services to Innovate UK, if you are VAT registered, then you do need to include VAT in your costs. If you're not VAT registered, then you can quote without it, but you won't be able to increase the values to cover VAT later on. So please do bear this in mind when applying. Successful applicants will be offered a contract for your deliverables, and payments will be made based on these milestones when they are achieved. So and against these deliverables. And we just to remind you that risks are yours to manage, and your proposal must be fully achievable, and that responsibility does lie with the applicant. We will not fund projects that do not deliver against the challenges identified for each market. We have this clear scope set out from each of the developmental opportunities in each of the countries in Australia, Canada and India. That is also available online as well as on the slides presented today. So please do take a look at those. We do ask for a letter of support, and we are only looking to fund projects that are within a year of being ready for market following the completion of the feasibility study. We will not fund projects that do not contain a significant level of innovation relevant to the rail industry, and we will not fund projects that have total eligible costs or project terms outside of the eligibility guidance. Just waiting for the slides to catch up. And over the last year or 18 months, many of you will have become very familiar with QR codes, probably use them to get into your favorite restaurants or bars over this time. So we've decided to join that trend and create a couple of QR codes for these competitions. The top two QR codes here, one on the left-hand side for the competition that we're discussing at the moment, and one in the top right for the competition that was presented earlier this morning about Hanoi Metro Line 5 in Vietnam. For those of you that would like a more traditional method, you can also look up the Innovation Funding Service and find the links to these competitions there as well. And that the web pages for those will outline all of the competition scope, eligibility, dates, etc. for you to look at in depth. And finally, for the slides in this section of the presentation are the competition dates. So today, of course, we've got the online briefing event, and this will also be available to watch on demand afterwards through the website. You can find the recording of this presentation. Competition will open today as well, and you can now start your applications and then close at 11 AM on the 13th of October, so 1 month from now. Applicants will be notified by the 15th of November, contracts awarded in December, and projects to start by the 1st of January, up to three months in duration, to be finished by the 31st of March 2022. That's all from me, and I will now hand back over to Daisy. Thank you.
Wonderful, much appreciated. Thank you so much, Dan and Dora. It's incredibly useful to have all the detail behind the competition, and I know our audience will agree. Just a quick one to the audience, a little reminder just to keep your questions coming in for the competition as well. So anything that you might want to ask, no matter how big or small, we do have the team and the capability here to answer those queries. Just while we move over to our next set of fantastic speakers, I just want to do a little plug, if no one minds, for KTN. For those of you who don't know us, we work extremely closely with Innovate UK, with the Department for International Trade, and all across government. And we're here to help in terms of making those connections. We're here to help in terms of discussing scope and viability with you, and really just answering any pressing, urgent theories or needs or queries or anything else that you might have about rail competitions. And of course, in this context, we do also have our international team at KTN who'd be very happy to help you with those international queries, alongside, of course, the Department for International Trade, who we're going to hear from shortly. I also wanted to flag for anyone who isn't aware, there is a Growing Internationally webinar, which is going to be on the 5th of October. That's part of the Britain is Great Exporting and Business series. So if you are interested in hearing more about that early stage, growing internationally for any particular export product that it might be within rail itself, of course, then you would be very welcome to join that. And you can find that on the Britain is Great website. Again, if you can't find it, feel free to get in touch directly with me and I'll help you to link in. So if you do want those questions answered, it might be a good place to join and hear about experiences of some UK businesses who have been successful in terms of exporting. So now that we have so many fantastic experts joining us from around the globe, and thank you very much for the timings. We realise that it isn't easy to be getting up either very, very early or staying up very, very late. So we very much appreciate it here for the audience for joining us. So we are going to move on to the introductions to our experts for the Global Rail Export Innovation Competition. And we're going to start with Australia, of course, and Ian Barnett, who is Senior Trade Development Manager, Infrastructure, based in Melbourne for the Department for International Trade. So, Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Daisy, and it's great to be with you all this afternoon, or good morning, wherever you may be. And it's nearly past my bedtime here in Australia. I may introduce myself. I'm Ian Barnett, the Sector Lead for Infrastructure and Energy for DIT across Australia and New Zealand. I'm going to say I'm delighted that Australia is included in this competition. And today I'll showcase the buoyant rail sector in Australia and why it's right for innovation, especially from companies just like yours. Next slide, please. So Australia may appear at the bottom of the world in this map, but can I reassure you it's the top of the world when it comes for rail opportunities here. My presentation today is going to cover a quick update on the Australian economy, what's happening in the rail market here in Australia, some ideas and areas for innovation, and also some handy tips on how you would be able to be successful in winning, being part of the competition here in Australia. Next slide, please. So, the Australian economy, a little bit about the Australian economy. So the Australian economy is one of the most consistent economies in the world, with nearly 3 decades of consistent growth. Here in Australia, the government has done a great job responding to the health and economic impact of the global pandemic. This graph illustrates that the economy has bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. And it's important to realise that all levels of government are using spending on infrastructure to stimulate economic recovery. This recovery will be boosted even further when we reach 70% vaccination rates, and when we're hoping to reopen our borders to international travellers at the beginning of 2022. I can't wait to have you come and visit me here in Australia. Next slide, please. I'd now like to spend a little bit of time talking about the rail sector here in Australia. So this graph is what we call our tsunami slide. And there is a slide for most sectors in Australia like this, and this is being prepared by BIS Oxford Economics. And what that shows is, I suppose, funding that's going to go into projects in different states around Australia. So hopefully you can see some different colours. Yellow is for Western Australia, orange is for Queensland, and then blue and green for New South Wales and Victoria. So there's some really important things that we need to learn from this. So just after our global financial crisis, most of the rail activity in Australia was occurring in Western Australia and Queensland. So you can see that little bump to the left. That's primarily rail activities that were supporting our mining boom. Since then, Australia's been transitioning from a resources-led economy to a services-led economy. And there begins the good story. So due to strong population growth, we're now spending catch up when it comes to spending on infrastructure, and particularly rail on the eastern seaboard. So you can see that spending has more than doubled since 2010 to where we are today at 2021. And all levels of government are committed to keeping that peak going forward. So that's the challenge for government, is to how we keep the mountain going forward. So a little bit about some of the projects that sit into that mountain. Firstly, our federal government is funding what's called the Inland Rail, which is a new 1,700 kilometre railway line from Melbourne through to Brisbane through inland New South Wales. Also in New South Wales, we have 2 major projects. One is the new Sydney Metro West, which is a new metro line going from the CBD out to the second city of Parramatta. And then the other exciting project is Western Sydney Metro, Western Sydney Airport, which connects Parramatta, which I've just mentioned, out to the new Western Sydney Airport. In Victoria, activity is also happening with a new Melbourne Airport rail link. Would you believe we don't have a rail link from the CBD out to our airport? Every city in the world has one of those. We're about to get one. And the other amazing project is called our Outer Suburban Rail Loop, which is a 50-year project that's starting to connect the major stations around the city to join up them for urban development and economic opportunities going forward. Next slide, please. what I'd like to do now is just talk a little bit about the rail network in more detail. Firstly, talking about rail gauges. As you can see, we have 41,000 kilometres of rail track. It's a big place, and rail is very important, and a big challenge of government is to get freight off-road onto rail. So just looking at the rail gauges, about 45% of our gauges are standard gauge, and that's mainly in New South Wales and the interstate network. About 40% is narrow gauge, and that's mainly in Queensland, Western Australia, and some in Tasmania. And the remaining 10% is broad gauge. And it's important to realise that those gauges are a legacy of the designers that were in Australia when we were colonised and which country those origins came from. So you can see that's a real challenge in itself. Physically, we have different gauges across different states. And the same thing applies to signalling. So we still have, in lots of parts of Australia, fixed block technology, the old-fashioned traffic light system for signalling. We're now starting to a program of bringing that system into a modern world. We're starting to trial European trade control systems, and they've been trialled, as I said, in New South Wales at the moment. And we have computer-based train control on some of Sydney Metro and also on Melbourne Metro at the moment. And on the major freight network, which is run by the Australian Rail Track Corporation, they are trialling advanced train management systems with their technology partner, Lockheed Martin. So I've spent some time just talking about that because therein lies a conundrum. How can we actually take the legacy of how Australia was colonised and then apply that into the 21st century? Thank you. Next slide. So let's have a look now at some of the challenges that we're trying to address. Firstly, operational optimization. So as I said previously, we are trying to synchronize new systems and old systems. So some of our systems are 100 years old. We're trying to bring those together. So you can imagine trying to operate an operating system with those systems. So the real challenge is how can we make that work from a physical perspective with tracks, a signalling perspective, and particularly operating perspective. The next challenge is really around assets. And you would have heard this a little bit earlier when Crossrail International were talking about some of the challenges they have. So our real challenge is that we are doing open heart surgery on the system at the moment. So how can we understand what we've got? What can be the new tools to help and maintain and develop the system going forward? And particularly safety. How can we do inspection of assets on a live operating system? And how can the operators better understand what they have and how that can work better into the future? The third one is around energy efficiency. And my team has been asked to lead on clean growth. And the UK are a leader in clean growth. And I might say that Australia is getting there slowly, but we need lots of help. So energy efficiency is really important to us. So if I look at energy efficiency, does that mean that we need to electrify more of our network? Then we think about what are the requirements around more power to run new signalling systems. Will we look at hydrogen-powered trains going forward to cover a 1,700 kilometre length of railway line? So energy efficiency is really important. And the government departments are saying, well, how can we do what we've got now, and how can we do that going into the future? Next slide, please. So, handy hints. This is my last slide, and just really want to focus on a number of things. First of all, there's a huge amount of public domain information available. And my encouragement to you is to immerse yourself into the ecosystem. All of our operators and government departments have great websites, and there's obviously a whole lot of information about the rail system. Secondly, it's important you recognise that each state is different, and that goes back to my earlier slide around how all the different systems came about in the first place. So you might be overwhelmed and say, well, how can I look over all of that? So my suggestion is to realise the challenges between and then challenges across, and maybe you'll come up with the ultimate clever solution to be able to do that. Third point, Australia is in lockdown, so be patient with us. When we're slack coming back to you, be patient, we'll come back to you. And the last point really is around how we can help as DIT. I've reached out to all the rail operators, the government departments that cover rail, and told them about this competition. And what I'd ask you to do is simply drop me a line and my team will say, I'll put you in touch with the right person. So can I say, in closing, we need your help now and into our exciting rail future, and all the very best. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ian. And I think that legacy piece in particular is hugely interesting. So working, of course, for our innovators within that local challenge and in that local context is really interesting. So thank you very much for sharing. I'm sure that our viewers appreciate the information as well. We're going to move on to India next. So I would like to hand you over to Mukul Verma, Senior Trade and Investment Advisor in New Delhi for the Department for International Trade. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Daisy, and thanks also for the opportunity to present here in this very exciting challenge. India, as you know, has been one of the largest rail networks, and it's a legacy network. So it's been almost 150 years old or more. So the challenges obviously are very many, but we have picked a few challenges here to share with you. But let me first begin with an overview of the sector. Next slide, please. So if you see the Indian railway sector, it can be divided into two segments. One is the mainline railway, which is the legacy railway that I talked about. And the other one is Metro Rail, which is a more recent development. So now it's a pretty fast-paced development happening, but it is relatively new, and there are very few challenges and issues. I mean, there's the technologies, the modern technologies are being deployed, the solutions are there available. So not many challenges. So our focus today will be on India's mainline railway, with long legacy operation and continuous growth, that it has brought several challenges. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry, so can you just go one slide back? So just to give you a view of the size and scale of the network, Indian rail network is currently the fourth largest in the world after the US, China, and Russia, spanning over about 65,000 route kilometers with nearly 7,000 railway stations. And prior to COVID pandemic, Indian Railways carried over 25 million passengers and 3 million tons of freight every day, operated around 1,300 passenger and around 8,500 goods trains daily. Approximately 30% of the freight traffic it carried and 20% of the passenger traffic. So that's the sort of, just to give you a sense of how big the network is. Next slide, please. Now, after COVID, I mean, it's right now it's still going on, but we believe that, I mean, this is now slowing down and it's on probably a recovery phase. What is expected after the crisis is a growth of 12.5%. Even if you cut down this growth by 2 notches, sometimes different people forecast different growth. India will still remain a sort of growth economy, high growth economy, and it will generate high demand for both passenger and freight movement as far as the rail is concerned. And government has allowed 100% FDI in the railway sector. So these are the drivers which will drive the sector. And also the government is also focusing on private sector investments into the sector. So once these things progress, there will be an expansion. The railway sector will tend to become more efficient, more robust, and there will be many more opportunities. Next slide, please. Government, obviously, considering this expectation of growth, they have continued to focus on the railway sector, augmenting it with more investment. And as a part of the National Rail Plan 2030, they want Indian Railways to be a future-ready railway. And the NRP projects that project the demand for the passenger traffic will be over 30 million passengers and over 10 million tons of freight per day. So that's the sort of estimate that the National Rail Plan has made. And the kind of investment that will go into it will be around 500 billion over the next 10 years. Indian government also provides some budgetary support to the railways. So 11 billion they have already allocated this year to the Indian Railways. Next slide, please. So where is the focus then? I mean, considering that it's a huge network and it's a sort of a growing demand over the network and the growing pressure, the focus is on network decongestion. So a number of new lines are being added in the passenger lines and integrated signaling, new signaling ETCS2 has been proposed for Indian Railways, which the Indian Railways thinks will probably help with decongestion. Then safety, of course, has been the focus always. Improved signaling will provide one of the support to safety. And then there are technology solutions for rail fracture detection, stress monitoring, predictive maintenance of critical parts. These are the focus areas for Indian Railways. And as you will see, some of our challenges that we have picked up will come out of these focus areas. Again, freight operations. Right now, Indian Railways' share of freight is pretty low in comparison with road, for example. So they want to optimize the existing network and resources. They have already built 2 brand new projects of dedicated freight corridors just for freight operations. Then the other focus area is station redevelopment. They want to make 600 stations world class. And in this, there will be a number of larger stations which will require a lot of international expertise as well. These will be, the larger cities will be integrated transport hubs which will require swift passenger movement and sustainable buildings. Transit-oriented development is also in focus as far as station development is concerned. So these are the areas which Indian Railways is trying to sort of promote within the station development program. Then energy efficiency is a key. It's always been, although rail is considered as a low energy consuming transport, electrification has been done over the past few years with a rapid pace. More is going on, and they need all kinds of solutions which provide energy efficiency as well as self-sufficiency. Focus is on solar as well as offshore, and this program is also picking up rapid speed. Next slide, please. So now coming down to the challenges, as I said, safety is one of the major concerns, and whoever we speak to in Indian Railways, they will talk about maintenance of assets. Now, so far, the assets have been maintained more or less. It has been manual operations, inspections, and then trying to rectify the faults. It's pretty time-consuming, inefficient. So these delays also not only disrupt the operations, but also have, safety issues. So railways wants some way of, improving this, making it a very efficient predictive maintenance system. So any solution that comes around that will, I think, find traction with Indian Railways. And it could be innovative solution in one area or more, perhaps, many different areas of composite solution in many different areas. But yeah, it should be the one which Indian Railways is able to roll out on a large scale considering the network, and it also needs to be cost effective. Within the predictive maintenance, the one thing which Indian Railways really wants to focus on is track monitoring and maintenance. So this is an important area for them, and this could be one area where the focus of finding better solutions, improved solutions, we can have a focus on that. Next slide, please. Then, as I said, freight, Indian Railways is concerned that the freight percentage in comparison to other modes of transport is gone down over the years, and they want to augment that. The existing network is pretty rickety. It is pretty badly managed in terms of systems and processes. So they don't have any sort of live information or information about what is the availability capacity of carrying freight, whether they can track it in time and delivery in time. All those kind of things are lacking. Perhaps not just because the system is old and it needs a little bit of revamp, but also I think they have not looked at it from a strategic point as to how to sort of revamp the processes and bring in some simple, newer systems, technologies, or processes to see that freight is booked efficiently, it is tracked, its delivery of freight is on the expected timelines, and then also to support end-to-end. Right now, it doesn't support end-to-end transportation, so that's a big drawback. So they should also integrate it with some method of end-to-end delivery of freight. So that will probably help utilizing the existing system. The NRP talks a lot on freight. And they are trying to do as much as they can on this. So any solution on freight will be appreciated by Indian Railways. Next slide, please. Then again, stations, particularly rail stations on the main line, now that they are trying to sort of make this through the station redevelopment program, world-class stations, and focused on the bigger cities. They want iconic structure. They want all the systems and processes such that they are world class, and the passenger comfort, movement, all that sort of thing they want to achieve. But the issue with India is that it is the amount of the number of people who use railways is huge, and the pressure on stations is very high. So it tends to get crowded, and not just that we have bigger crowds, but also the current system of manual frisking, door frame metal detectors, and X-ray, they don't help. They are pretty inefficient. They just are obstructions to make queues even longer and things. And also the baggage handlings, there is no mechanism to sort of handle baggage. So these stations face queues and crowding, which needs to be addressed. I mean, and if you're making world-class stations with some retail experience and to utilize the premises commercially to gain revenue through other sources, then you need to free up passengers' time to look at those retail outlets and experience and go and spend some time and money over there. So that's something which will probably be required going forward. And any solution which is like innovative on security management, on crowd and baggage management, I think will find traction with Indian Railways. So this, I mean, once the system is in place and passengers are more comfortable and free, then they'll probably be using the commercial outlets also. as envisaged in the development of these stations. Next slide, please. Then this has been a constant challenge with Indian Railways. The network is old. It needs a lot of investment. It's been traditionally there has been underinvestment in the network. They're now trying to sort of electrify, revamp the network. But as far as the railways capacity to do that in terms of investment, that is pretty limited. So whilst they do that, and they've done it on some lines, which are like more frequently used routes, but they are not able to make those kind of investment on the larger network. So any solution which is like on existing infrastructure, if we can increase the speeds to this solution. Now this has been challenging because increasing speed is not just one area. I mean, it's not just you can have a better rolling stock and you will have greater speed. It will be probably signaling, traction, track, everything. So it could be that solution is needed in more than one area, and that sort of makes this challenge even bigger. But yes, I think as far as Indian Railways is concerned, this is one of the main areas that they want to focus. They have not yet been able to find a great solution. So I think these are the 4 challenges that we picked up from the Indian mainline railways. And if there is any innovative solutions that come up in these areas, then I think they can find way into the Indian Railways as we go forward. Thank you. I think that will probably be maybe just one slide more. Next slide, please. Sorry, yeah. Just to sort of give you a reality check on what the Indian market is. Since it is a government-controlled railways, it's like run by the Ministry of Railways and Railway Board, and it's completely. I mean, there is no distinction between making a policy or regulation and running the railways. So it has been pretty sort of bureaucratic, and it is also been pretty sort of slow in response to making fast changes. It has also been under political pressure because it's government controlled, and so they have not been able to sort of increase the fares and freight rates to the extent that a commercially run organization would be. So they have always played on using technologies, systems which are low cost, in very small budgets and things like that. And that sort of psyche remains within the rail bureaucracy. So it is a very cost-sensitive market. So any product and technology that is developed in Indian Railways should be cost-effective for rollout over the vast network that it has. Then technology solution and products supplied for Indian Railways, there is an organization called Research Design and Standards Organization, which approves these products or technologies that are to be supplied to Indian Railways. So, and that process itself can take a lot of time for approvals. So one must be glued on to that process and navigate the whole RDSO system and get those approvals. That's a very important thing. Then it can take a long time. It's not that, I mean, once the product is approved and it will get immediately supplied to the railways. The processes, the procurement processes are pretty much, like a public procurement would be, a competitive bidding, number of people competing, and all that sort of thing. So it can take a long time to get your first order or success. So companies will need to have a long-term commitment and resources to support that. Then, of course, having a partner, we always recommend it be a good thing, because navigating Indian rail sector is challenging. And anyone who has his feet on the ground, who has been in the sector, can be really, really helpful for any international company to come and not only to sort of promote or sell their products or solutions or get approvals, but also in the longer run, they will require companies to be around, or at least have some local representation for supporting, servicing those products and solutions. So, we here in DIT, we would be very happy to point you in the right direction, who would be able to sort of identify suitable partners for you. We have our associate organization called UK India Business Council, who does these sort of assignments, and we'll be happy to connect you with them. And there, as well as there are private consulting organizations who we can connect you. So, I think if there is anything where we can support, we'll be delighted to. And we look forward to great participation in this competition and some solutions focused on the Indian rail sector. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And again, really important context for a true huge railway network, as you say, just enormous, and understanding that local context in terms of size, but also manual operations, and then of course safety within that, all the way to freight in an aging system and everything in between. So that's really helpful. Thank you very much. And last, but most certainly not least, for this particular section of the agenda, we are going to move all the way over to Canada with Nav Sandhu, Trade Advisor, Infrastructure for the Department for International Trade. Over to you, Nav.
Great, thank you, Daisy, and thanks for this opportunity to present on Canada. Good morning or good afternoon or evening, wherever you are. I'm Nav Sandhu, Trade Officer for Infrastructure and Rail with DIT based in Toronto, covering Eastern Canada, specifically the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. Next slide, please. Just looking at the agenda, we'll kick off with some quick facts about Canada, followed by an overview of the rail sector, moving on to some of the rail challenges we're seeing here in the country, and close off with some top tips on how to partner in Canada. Next slide, please. Quick facts, Canada is the second largest country in terms of landmass, and to put that into perspective, it's 40 times the size of UK, and the province of Ontario is 4 times the size of the UK. So the reason why I point this out is really for new and incoming exporters who sometimes have a tendency to underestimate the size of the country when they're coming to do business in Canada. For example, Toronto itself can take you up to about 2 hours to get from one side of the city to the other. We have 3 levels of government: federal, provincial, and municipal. Major projects are primarily driven at the provincial level in all 10 provinces. The federal government is responsible for national infrastructure projects and contribute to funding of provincial and municipal projects. And municipalities own the majority of infrastructure assets, but rely on provincial and federal funding for all major projects. And finally, Canada is part of the USMCA trade agreement that gives us a market share of almost 450 million people and almost $1.2 trillion worth of trade. Next slide, please. Quick overview of the rail sector in Canada. We have over 49,000 kilometers of track, so it's a big country, just like Australia, most of which are owned by the country's 2 main freight operators, Canadian National Rail and Canadian Pacific Railways. Passenger rail services are primarily provided by Via Rail, which is a Crown corporation. All 3 of Canada's largest cities, so that's Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, provide commuter rail services, and all 6 of Canada's major cities provide rapid transit services. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of all the major transit projects taking place across the country. I would love to go into a lot of detail about each one of these, but I'll highlight the 2 in red there. The 2 biggest projects combining for over $45 billion Canadian dollars, and they're both taking place in Ontario, specifically in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. Next slide, please. A little bit about rail research in Canada. Most of it is being advanced through contributions from both the academic and industrial sides or institutions. So universities in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, British Columbia, are all actively conducting rail innovation research projects. These institutions mostly focus on rail infrastructure and climate change mitigation techniques. So having said that, recently more emphasis has been placed specifically on alternative propulsion systems, energy efficiency, and operational optimization. And these also fall under some of the innovation challenges here in Canada. I've also highlighted a couple of government-led research units, the first being the Innovation Centre of Transport Canada, which focuses on technological innovations to address emerging challenges such as the rapidly increasing flow of goods and people, increased congestion, and the environmental footprint of transportation. The second would be Canada's National Research Council. They have their rail vehicle and track optimization program, which aims to improve the operational efficiency and safety of Canadian railways through rail vehicle engineering solutions, vehicle track interaction services, and track maintenance planning. They're also, it's good to point out that they're also keen to seek out new technologies that would improve rail condition monitoring and inspection, minimize costly unplanned maintenance, and extend rail asset life cycles. Next slide, please. So moving on, we'll look at some of the innovation challenges we've identified, and those are, as mentioned before, the alternative propulsion systems, energy efficiency, and operational optimization. Moving on to the next slide. So we'll kick off with alternative propulsion technologies. So Canada's adoption and implementation of alternative propulsion has been somewhat slower than most developed countries and developed and developing countries. So even slower than China and even Morocco. Most trains in Canada are currently powered by diesel and diesel electric propulsion systems. However, some trains, such as TransLink's SkyTrain, which is in Vancouver, use electrified motor and propulsion technologies. Freight services account for a significant percentage of greenhouse gas rail emissions in Canada, which is a big concern for the market. However, CN Rail, as mentioned before, Canadian National Rail, piloted and using alternative fuel mixes consisting of liquefied gas and diesel, but concluded that there needs to be more research and development in order to allow this method to be more sustainable and economic in economic terms. Biofuels have also been explored in the rail sector, in the freight sector, but again, its adoption has been somewhat slow, since raising biofuel levels could increase the risk of damage to diesel engines. As for hydrogen fuel cells, in the city of Toronto, their transit agency Metrolinx conducted feasibility studies to investigate the potential of hydrogen fuel cells as an alternative propulsion strategy. However, they have expressed concerns that hydrogen technology has not yet been implemented in an equivalent rail environment to that scale. So they raise questions regarding fuel production, consumption, storage, and transport and refueling. So this is one of the challenges that we're seeing in the market, and looking to any kind of advancements in innovation globally, especially from the UK. But nonetheless, there is an opportunity, for, like I said, for Canada to apply internationally developed rail technologies. As mentioned, hydrogen fuel cell technologies, wireless power transfer systems, and battery train technologies, along with along specific corridors with super high density passenger traffic. Next, please. We'll look at energy efficiency next. So Canada has been pursuing efforts to modernize its railways systems to improve energy efficiency and reduce power losses in the network. So electric power systems, energy storage systems, so ESSs, and operational improvements which are proven methods to increase energy efficiency within the rail sector. So there is an opportunity for Canada to apply, again, highly developed rail technologies, especially within ESS, to boost energy efficiency across the rail sector. Furthermore, there's a demand for incorporating big data and AI technologies for optimizing various processes in the rail industry and rail industry operations and safety and maintenance. Next slide, please. The third challenge revolves around operational optimization and integrated mobility. So there are many academic research activities on optimizing track usage, timetables, and real-time train controls, but some areas within Canada's rail industry need improvement to become more competitive globally. Specifically, the adaptation of train scheduling systems that optimize the use of track for both freight and passenger rail is just not as advanced in Canada. However, rail operators have been employing data collection and telemetry tools to optimize the deployment and speeds of their own trains. Again, there is a demand for data technologies in rail maintenance to improve rail operations, both indirectly by reducing train breakdowns and other accidents. Some Canadian railway companies have projects underway to test and refine the ability to use big data to improve the capabilities of automated track and rolling stock defect detection equipment. Research and development in integrated mobility is also important in increasing rail ridership and improving the energy efficiency of the entire Canadian passenger rail network. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, I'll talk about some of the top tips for partnering in Canada, not very dissimilar to my colleagues in Australia and in India, but just some overarching advice would be to be prepared to do your homework on the market itself and specific partners that you're targeting in the market. Have a focused export or business development plan. One must demonstrate a commitment to the market through regular market engagements. So that would be like visits or establishing a permanent presence in the market. Relationship building and long-term outlook. So you'd create your local network of decision makers, industry influencers, and industry peers. And obviously, everything has been on hold for the last year or so, but post COVID, again, an emphasis on visiting the market and your contacts regularly, and keep relationships warm when you're not in the market. So that just means, pick up the phone, really. Overall, there are 5 streams, as I've pointed out in this slide, that one can look at for partnering, and these are through the academic stream, so via various research programs taking place in universities across the country, through partnering or engaging with industry research institutes. So pointing out one in particular would be the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium. Also, as mentioned before, through engaging with major transit agencies such as the TTC, which is the Toronto Transit Commission, Metrolinx, and TransLink, as well as with the private sector's rail suppliers such as OEMs and large engineering and consulting firms. As for networking, which inevitably leads to various partnership opportunities, we suggest joining industry associations. In particular, what's been very useful for many new incoming exporters is joining the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships and the Canadian Association for Railway Suppliers. So I think those are active links on these slides. If you do get a hold of them later on, they will take you directly to the websites. Thank you very much, and back to you, Daisy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nav. And it's great, yet again, to understand more about the situation on the ground with another huge railway network, and that commitment to innovation, as well as the support that you outlined from, everything from academia to the public sector and beyond in Canada. So thank you so much for taking the time and clarifying that for our audience. So now we are on to our last Q&A block of the day. We have quite a few questions coming in, which is fantastic to see. So thank you very much to our audience. And I'm going to start with one for clarity to Dora and Dan, which we've had come in again, which I think is just helpful for anyone else who might be tuning in. Is this SBRI Global Red Export Innovation only for companies, or can organisations like universities apply?
Thanks, Daisy. Yeah, well, same question as earlier and same answer as earlier, actually. So the answer is yes, we are open to all organisations, including universities as well. So yeah, similar to as Kelvin said earlier. Really.
Thanks, just for clarity in case we've had someone join just for this particular section, so much appreciated. We've got a few country specific questions, so I think I might dip into a few of those. Are Indian Railways the joint client for the India competition? Mukul, you're muted.
So, sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Are Indian Railways the joint client for the India competition?
For the India competition, no.
Well, the segment of this in the scope. So for the India element of the innovation competition, are India Railways the?
No, I think partner? This is not one for me. Actually, perhaps more for Kelvin. I don't think so. I mean, this is focused on UK companies, no? So it should not be. Am I right, Kelvin?
Sorry, Michael. Yes, that's absolutely right. So there's no commercial relationship with any organisation in India, nor Canada, nor Australia at this time. If organisations wish to set one up, that's entirely up to them. But this is a UK public funded competition. No funding sourced in the three countries mentioned.
Thanks. Good for once again. We'll have a Canadian question then.
Sorry, Daisy, just to jump in. Can I just clarify that just for total clearness, that we would expect a partner to be identified in India. So, for example, a rail company or somebody within that market who has the capacity to enable commercial impact, that you would have the letter of support from, as mentioned in my slides, and we can support you in finding that partner if you haven't got one already. But then indeed, as Calvin says, the actual report and the funding is for UK companies to report back to Innovate UK on their feasibility study.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
To interrupt.
No, it's fine. It's always helpful to have the extra detail so that we make sure people really understand. So that's brilliant. Thank you. We'll have a Canadian question then. Does the energy efficiency in Canada include work towards the electrification of existing lines?
Yes, it does. In fact, in Toronto, for example, we have a new, the expansion of what is called the GO rail network, and that's moving away from diesel lines to fully electric lines. So, and that was one of the projects that was highlighted earlier on as one of the really, really large projects. So absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nav. We'll ask you another one then, since we've got you. Is it possible to apply to the funding call for Canada more than once with different product and service offerings? So it might be you and a mix of Kelvin and Dora.
Well, I heard something about this earlier on, and I think this would go directly back to Kelvin to answer this question.
Yeah, or go on, Kelvin.
Go on, Dan.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and say, yeah, absolutely, it's fine. It's again similar to earlier. It is one, one application per solution, but you can submit more than one application. So yes, please do feel free to apply multiple times for different countries, different themes, or different solutions. But yeah, please just note that they will be assessed individually on their own merits.
And to quickly add to that, Dan, you can do that, but only if a team can resource both applications, should both prove successful. So do that at your peril if you're quite a small organisation.
Brilliant. Thank you. And we won't leave Australia out. So let's have a look. Ian, for Australia, does the monitoring and predictive maintenance assets include infrastructure and rolling stock?
Yes, it does. So one of our challenges obviously is we've got a whole lot of new stations being built at the moment. And then the issue is I suppose, how those interact with passengers, mobilities of a service, etc., etc. So infrastructure, yes. And the other part of the question, Daisy?
Does it, the whole question was, does it include infrastructure and rolling stock within that monitoring and predictive maintenance element?
Yes, we have some interesting programs right across Australia with rolling stock. So there's some public-private partnerships at the moment that are procuring rolling stock. So there's great opportunities to integrate with that, yes.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We have another question in the context of India again. So for India, is RDSO approval still required for security technologies to be used in or outside the stations, used away from trackside infrastructure or trains? And then follow up, what is the typical cost of approval, if so?
There are areas where RDSO approval may not be required. RDSO approval tends to get focused mostly on the operations. So if there is anything to do with operations which is considered critical, that needs to pass the RDSO tests. But if it is not related to operations, it may not be. I am not. This is something which will need to be checked out in the case of a specific solution. We can always, go back to RDSO and check for you. If you can let us know what the product is, what the solution is. But yeah, it's right that not for everything RDSO approval requires. It's more focused on the operations. Any technology, solution, or products going into operations. But one qualification here that if, for example, you are bringing in a solution for railway which is not operations, it will still need to have certain international accreditations, approvals, or it should be proven in some other markets. That's something which may be required. But as I said, for a specific case, we need to check. And as far as the cost is concerned, I think for Indian companies to apply, it is somewhere around maybe £1,500 or something like that. But maybe more for international companies. It could vary again from what kind of approvals are required, what kind of resource our RDSO will need to sort of, they will need to do that approval process. But again, if one can give us a specific product or technology that needs to be approved, then we can go back to RDSO and check and come back to it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've got one again for the Innovate UK team. Can the funding include travel costs for visits to the markets?
It can, although we expect it to be limited at the moment. So it's set out in the scope online actually, but it says that travel and material costs are expected to be a small proportion of the total R&D services costs. And as we mentioned earlier, R&D should be at least 50% of the total costs as well. So we do anticipate that the majority of the project should be undertaken remotely where possible.
Brilliant, thanks. We'll stick with you again, I think, and ask, does this call consider innovations for metro and tram systems, or is this only mainline railways?
Yes, absolutely. So we are speaking about the whole of the rail market, so that includes light rail, includes metro, underground, etc. Assuming that applies to the country you are looking to deliver to. So obviously it has to be suitable for the market.
Yeah, thank you. And then we've got two final questions. We will go with are you looking for physical solutions only, or are strategy and process-based solutions also acceptable?
Shall I take that one again? So these are feasibility studies for this initial funding. we are looking for solutions which address the challenges and opportunities listed. Generally, that would be a physical solution, but it's not necessarily the case, I guess. So please just make sure you sort of adhere to the scope and check what's outlined in terms of the challenge that you're trying to address. But generally, it will be a physical product.
Brilliant, thank you. And you've partially answered this, but I'll ask it just for complete clarity anyway. As you say, it's feasibility study, but are you looking for a working technology solution or concept that can then be further developed with the client?
Yes, so as we've outlined in the scope, products or the solutions should be available to deliver within 12 months of the feasibility study being completed. So yes.
Thank you very much. And that is the end of our Q&A. So thank you very much to all of our panelists. I'm really pleased that you're all able to stay to answer those questions about your specific areas of expertise in specific nations. So thank you very much to all of you. And our last speaker of the day will be speaking on a very important topic indeed that I'm sure that all of our audience is keen to hear about. And that is applying explained on the Innovation Funding Service. So we have Sonia Harris, who is Portfolio Manager at Innovate UK, to explain more and to go into the detail for us. So Sonia, take it away.
Thanks very much, Daisy. Hi, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm going to go through the competition application process, and we'll start just by getting a little more information about SBRI. Next slide, please. Okay. So the key features of SBRI, they are development procurement contracts, and they're 100% funded. The contract is with the prime supplier, and we may choose to subcontract, but that remains solely you remain solely accountable. You may choose. The IP will rest with you as the supplier, and you have certain usage rights with the public sector. Companies are encouraged to exploit IP and will be assessed on that basis. And eligibility regarding SBRIs, they are open to all organisations, as we've already covered. There is no limit on size or type of company, and all organisations must be able to demonstrate a route to market. Next slide, please. So we're going to recap the eligibility. We have gone through this for both competitions already, but it's useful just to have that recap. So next slide, if I may. Firstly, for the Global Rail Export Innovation Competition, projects can be up to £50,000 and will be 3 months in length. To lead, you can be an organisation of any size. Contracts are awarded to you as a single legal entity, and it's expected that all participants will work with an in-country unfunded partner. For the digital transformation of the Hanoi Metro Line 5, projects can be up to £75,000 and 3 months in length. And again, to lead, you can be an organisation of any size. Contracts awarded to that single legal entity again, and you will be working with Crossrail International to deliver a feasibility study to support the digital transformation of the Hanoi Metro Line 5. Next slide, please. We've created a couple of eligibility trees, which you'll be able to view through the IFS portal, and they can assist you in understanding whether you are eligible to apply for either competition. If you can just click to the next one. Apologies, they're probably not particularly visible on screen, but please do go online and have a further look at those. Next slide, please. These are the key dates to bear in mind for this competition. It's important to note that the submission deadline is at 11 AM UK time on the dot. IFS will automatically close, so at 1 minute past, you will not be able to submit your applications. We always strongly recommend with IFS that you submit your application as early as possible, as traffic on deadline day can be quite high, and this also will avoid any technical difficulties that you may have. If you do experience any difficulties at all, please contact our customer support team in advance of the deadline, and we will do our best to assist you in good time. Next slide, please. So the Innovation Funding Service is the platform that you would use to make your application into this competition. Next slide, please. You've seen some useful QR codes that we've published today, and there's also links to the competition in the slide deck. When you click into the competition webpage, you'll be directed here, and you can use the keyword search if you don't have the QR codes to find the competition. Simply then click on the title and you'll be able to go into the competition itself. You can see a tabbed view in the competition when you go in, which will show you the eligibility criteria, scope, key dates, and information on how to apply. When you're happy, please click Start New Application. And if we go to the next slide, you can then see that to apply for the competition, the lead applicant will need to create an account in IFS. If you've applied previously to competitions using IFS, then you can simply sign in. You can then use the Companies House lookup to search for your organisation to save typing in your name and address. But if you're not on Companies House, we would ask you to enter that information manually. Next slide, please. So the first section in your application is around your project details. We ask you to outline your project team, details of the members of your team, and you can also invite any colleagues that you wish to assist you in your application. The application details would be the outline of the title and timescales of your project. We then ask you to tell us who made you aware of the competition and how long your organisation has been established for. Next slide. We would also then ask you to select the category that details your organisation's primary area of focus and to complete our EDI survey. We focus on equality, diversity and inclusion to address underrepresentation in business innovation and ensure that ED&I is represented in all of our activities. For your project summary, we would ask you to provide a short summary of your project, describe how it meets the scope of the competition. And this is key really for you setting the scene to our assessors as it gives them an overview of your vision. Public description, this is something that we use to be published if your project is successful, so just please be aware and here of any confidentiality. And then as we've touched on for both competitions, we have themes and we ask you to select a specific theme that fits your project. Next slide, please. The application questions for both competitions are set out here on the slide. Each of the questions are worth marks. Questions 2 and 6 are worth 20 marks. Questions 3, 4 and 5 are scored out of 10. Please note, very detailed guidance is associated with each question on IFS, and questions 2 and 5 will allow you for an appendices. The limit for that is 10 megabytes in size. Next slide, please. So looking now through at the application finances. Next slide. For labour costs, we ask you to enter the role within project, gross annual salary, number of staff and the days to be spent on the project. It will then automatically calculate the total costs for you. If you have multiple people in the same role on the same average salary, then please enter this in the role within project field. If any employee is part-time, you should enter their costs as a full-time equivalent, and you can adjust the working days per year from the default if this is different for your project. Please note that dividends, bonuses and non-productive time cannot be included within your labour costs as they are deemed ineligible. When making grant claims against labour costs, actual costs claims must be supported with timesheets. Next slide, please. Eligible overhead costs include things such as general office consumables, administrative costs, finance services, HR and central and distributed computing. They should be charged in proportion to the amount of work involved in the project and must be realistic. Here you can provide a breakdown of the overheads that you expect to incur. Next slide. Thank you. Please enter and describe what materials you intend to use on the project, the volume and the cost. Materials must be project specific. Provide as much information as possible. For example, if you were to just put consumables at £50,000, that would not give us enough detail and you would then be required to provide more information from the project finance team if you were successful. Any items that you would usually depreciate should be done as per your company's policy and listed in capital usage. Materials supplied by associated companies or subcontracted from other consortium members must be listed at cost, excluding any profit element or margin. Next slide, please. Capital usage, this is where you can describe how you're using the equipment, whether it's new or existing, new purchase costs, how long you are depreciating over and the residual value at the end. These calculations would need to be in line with your own accounting practices. Next slide, please. Subcontractors. So if this cost is going to be significant, we would ask you to justify who, why and what you need them for, both here and in your application. It's important that you justify the use of subcontractors within your application, as the assessors do not see this level of financial detail and they only see the total cost. If you use a parent or sister company, please ensure that you list at cost and do not include your profit. Next slide. Thank Thank you. Travel and subsistence, I think we've mentioned this already, but in here you can include things such as essential meetings that need to happen during the project. You cannot include any sales or marketing activity as this is deemed ineligible. Travel costs must be at economy travel only, and you should be prepared to provide a breakdown of these costs if the finance reviewer asks for more detail. For example, we may require you to split a trip into subsistence, accommodation and travel components. Next slide, please. Other costs, please check the finance guide for what costs can be included here. If you're unsure, please do not hesitate to contact our customer support team. Any other costs which don't fit in the previous categories, for example, training and directly attributable to your project, licensing new technologies can also be added in here. Please ensure no double counting takes place and that all of your costs are justified. Next slide. Thank you. Once you've completed the other cost categories, you'll be asked to confirm if you're VAT registered. If you select yes, IFS will automatically add VAT on, calculated at 20%. If you're not VAT registered, then you can quote without VAT, but you would not be able to increase invoice values to cover VAT later on. Next slide, please. So looking now, this is a summary of the project costs for the project, and this is also what the assessors will see when they look at your application. Next slide. The next section on IFS is about your organisation. In here, you'll need to select organisation size, enter your turnover from the last financial year, and remember the number of full-time employees that you have in your organisation. Next slide. Payment milestones. So in this section, we would ask you to enter each milestone and deliverable where appropriate and link the milestone with a payment request. These milestones can mark the completion of a major phase of work, and you can choose to create a milestone to indicate a big task or deliverable or anything you require really. The month at which you want to set your milestones might vary depending on your project, your organisation and other factors. The information provided in this section will form your preferred payment schedule, so please bear that in mind. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before you can submit your application, you need to agree to the draft terms and conditions for this procurement competition. They will differ from any that you've agreed to before. If you are successful in your application, you will then sign a final contract with us, which may include additional details agreed between you and ourselves. Next slide, please. Submission of your application. Okay, so if you find that you need to edit your application once you've submitted it, you can do so. Firstly, you need to reopen your application in your IFS dashboard. You will see the option to reopen as shown on the slide here. Once you've reopened, you can make your changes to your application, and when you're finished, please remember to resubmit. Simply click on the green Review and Submit button, review your application once more, and then click on the final Submit button. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. As we've already mentioned and advised earlier, please try and submit your application in plenty of time. We track site usage and submission uploads, and as you can see from the slide shown here, the majority of applicants do leave it to the final hours and sort of 30 minutes before. So if you can submit early, that's great, and it will also avoid any last-minute technical issues that you may have. Next slide. So how do we assess your application? Next slide, please. For this competition, your application will be assessed, and that assessment will involve a scope check and then a review by 3 assessors. The assessors always look for clarity, detail, and justification, and to see that the applicant has presented a viable opportunity for growth with an exciting innovation where public funding will make a real difference to developing their idea, and that the right people and the right approach are being taken to run a successful project and exploit the results. Please answer all of the questions in the guidance so that the assessor can award you maximum marks. Even if you have a fantastic idea, if you don't fully answer the questions, then you won't score well. Make sure your application reads well. You need to keep the assessors engaged and interested in your proposal and get them excited about your idea. They may well be reading a lot of applications, so do try to make yours stand out. Next slide, please. We review the scores and feedback to check that our assessors are adhering to our guidelines and scoring fairly. In some cases, if we feel that a score is unjust and not supported by the feedback given, we may remove that score as an outlier and update the total score for the application. Please be aware that in some instances we could remove both low and high outliers, and as a result scores could increase or possibly decrease. If outliers are removed, we are unable to reflect this change in IFS as the decision is reached outside of the Innovation Funding Service system. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just a few notes on feedback. We collate feedback from the written comments of our assessors. It's intended to be constructive and to highlight both strong and weak areas of your application. Please bear in mind that because applications are assessed by a number of assessors, we may receive information which appears to be conflicting, and this may just reflect the different interpretations of the proposal that you submitted. Next slide. On the slide now, you can see an excerpt from our panel sheet. This is the sheet we create when all of our assessments are complete. The right-hand column shows the score for a particular application, and the highlighted column shows the score spread. That's the difference between the top and the bottom scores. The next two columns tell us whether an application has been marked out of scope or not recommended for funding. If we see a count of 2 or more in the instances for this competition, then we would review the application's detailed scores and feedback to check why this has happened and if those decisions are justified. Next slide, please. We mentioned outliers. So on this slide here, you can see the green box highlights a particular assessor's score and the purple box highlights a set of scores for a particular question. We look for a difference of 20 or more within the assessor's total score to identify an outlier. At first glimpse, we would consider assessor 3 here to be the outlier with a score of 62, but we would then ensure that that decision had been backed up by the feedback that that assessor had given. Next slide, please. The lead applicant will be notified when feedback is available, and this will be viewable in the IFS dashboard by the lead. They can log in on screen to see that. Next slide, please. So looking ahead now just to successful applicants. Next slide. If you're unsuccessful in the competition, you can use the feedback that you receive from our assessor to develop your idea and apply into another competition that allows previously submitted applications. If you are successful, you'll be assigned a delivery executive who will guide you through the project setup process. You will have 10 days to complete the details of your project team, project details and bank details. Projects, as we stated for both competitions, must start by the beginning of January. Next slide, please. The lead applicant is responsible for providing any exploitation plans that may be required, and all communication will take place through the IFS portal. Contracts can only be signed by the project manager on behalf of the organisation, and you will be assigned a monitoring officer as well once you're going live. Next slide, please. These are our useful contact details. I've mentioned the customer support services team a couple of times, so you can contact them using the details provided on the slide here. Next slide, please. That's everything from me. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Daisy.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Sonia. Obviously a really important topic for anyone who wants to be successful in their bid. So many thanks indeed for your time. And we are at the end of our session. So thanks so much to all our speakers. It has been a genuine pleasure listening to you all. These are 2 incredible competitions and the opportunities are tremendous. So I have no doubt there will be some superb bids and outcomes. We're ready and waiting to assist. So please do get in touch. And finally, to close today's session, I'll simply wish you all good luck.